Well, for the balance of the hour, Catherine Austin Fitts is our guest. We're going to cover a whole host of different issues with her today. She's with Solari.com, investment advisor, founder and managing member of Solari Investment Advisory Services, LLC. It's spelled SOLARI.com. Catherine has designed and closed over $25 billion of transactions and investments to date, and has led portfolio strategy for $300 billion of financial assets and liabilities. We recently interviewed her for her upcoming film, Fall of the Republic 2. Catherine's experiences on Wall Street and Washington, D.C. are chronicled in Dillon Read and the Aristocracy of Stock Portfolios. She's also a former government official, Assistant Secretary of Housing, Federal Housing Commissioner under Bush 1, investment banker, managing director, and member of the board of Wall Street firm Dillon Read & Co., Inc., and so it doesn't get any more elite than that. And she joins us for the next 51 minutes here today. Catherine, out of the gates, we're going to get into government health care and your take on what it does. But I first wanted to go to this Business Week article. FDIC wants pension funds to prop up failed banks. And, in fact, this isn't the Bloomberg. This is the Raw story. I want the Bloomberg or Business Week. I want to show people that one. This is basically the same article. I mean, here's a link to the Bloomberg News, because I wanted to read the actual quotes where they're ordering, with this color of law, kind of like they ordered the banks to take the bailout, wink, wink, to invest public and private pension funds, quote, in failed banks. Catherine Austin Fitts, what is all that about?
Well, we have seen the pension funds over the last 10 to 20 years come under significant pressure to invest in a variety of things which have left the pension funds in real trouble. So we have the pension funds. The pension fund, the American pension funds, were the key vehicle used to finance the housing bubble, and have gotten, left holding the bag. And so it is incredibly important, Alex, that pension funds have the legal protection and authority to finance, what is the right thing to do. And if there's one reform that needs to happen, it's a real investigation of why do the pension funds keep doing, the scams, and how do you stop that? Because it's left, we now have state and local governments and companies having to come up with new big pension fund payments because there's been too much political interference. You've heard me tell the story where the president of the largest pension fund in the country, Cal Pers, said to me in 1997 when I was trying to interest him in refinancing American communities, he said, it's too late. You don't understand. They've given up on the country. They're moving all the money out starting in the fall. And my question is, well, who's they, and how can they order you as a pension fund board to just, do things with your money? And the reality is, if CalPERS had invested in the fundamental infrastructure and well-being of American communities and the American infrastructure, they would have lost a lot less money. Instead of losing it on the pump and dump.
And we would have an infrastructure and a nation, but this is predatory. And
right.
Again, you were there at the top of the pyramid watching this happen, trying to stop it on record.
Right.
Even at the time. So to be
right.
clear, we have the head NASA climatologist, we have the UN, we have all these world leaders, Bill Gates, saying they want to destroy industrial society, so they get you in debt, get your local governments, pension funds, police,
right.
fire, you name it, to invest. They move it all offshore.
Right.
Then the country implodes, and then they come in with even more debt.
Right. And
then they take over health care. Then they run your life. Go ahead.
Right. So then they say your pension funds have lost all this money. Now, what's the FDIC up to? The last person who should be telling the pension funds what they should invest in is the FDIC. Now, I say that, and Alex, what you need to know is, the patterns appear that lots of small banks are being targeted in a way that's ending up providing subsidy to the people who pick them up. In other words, we have a double standard in enforcement by the banking regulators, so the big banks who've been doing all the improper things get bailed out, and the small banks who've been well managed are getting targeted and taken over in a way that subsidizes the big banks. So you have to be careful behind here, that we don't see the FDIC driving the small banks into pension funds in a way that is part of an economic warfare game. And my fear is the next thing you know, you see state and local government pension funds financing someone like Soros, or the big hedge fund operators picking up these small banks for cheap.
Absolutely. So that's why I brought this article up first. And I want you to spend some more time on this before we get into some other related issues, because here they are in Business Week in Bloomberg saying, and Obama's people are now out there pushing this, that, we're going to just take your pension funds wholesale to protect them. And then, of course, they'll invest those in derivatives again. Then they'll take a large portion of it down the road, get people more dependent on government. Well, we did take most of it, but, you got to stick with us or you won't get any of it. It's this scam artist trap.
Here's the question. Should capital be allocated according to, one, the preferences of the people who are either responsible, own it, or control it? Two, according to economic performance, i.e., what's the best investment? Or three, should it be channeled according to government dictates to a few small investors that allow them to control and own everything?
Well, let me stop you again. Exactly. It sounds good that in the banking bill, the government is now officially in the banking business. Slipped into it was a student loan legislation where the government will now be the person loaning, but really it'll be the government directing you to specific top 3 or 4 banks. So this is a vertical integration. And I want to be clear here for new listeners. The government controls the regulators. They can arrest or set up or shut down or sanction any pension fund manager that doesn't do what they're told. And here they are in Bloomberg openly telling the federal government, run by private banks at the top, telling the pension fund controllers, you will invest with us, quote, in failed banks. So this is the government completely taking over society. Break down how serious this is.
It's the Soviet Union. But here's what you've got. Let's say your neighbor, Alex, is an insider, and you are an outsider, and your insider neighborhood plays ball with the government, and the government says, you know something, you can finance your car for 0%, which is what hedge fund operators have been doing. They've been on the carry trade. They've been borrowing for 0 to 1%. And your neighbor can finance his car with 0% financing. He can finance his mortgage with 0% financing. And we're going to provide equity financing to his business for 2%. Meantime, you have to pay 5% for your car financing, 6% for your mortgage financing, and by the way, you can't get equity for your business, but you can borrow at the bank for 12% if you can get somebody to guarantee you. Okay, now, how long is it going to take before your neighbor has, a much bigger car, a much bigger house, and has bought your business, that went bankrupt? We're talking about controlling through the back door by controlling the cost of capital, and certain players get a very low or even free or negative cost of capital. So I'm a bank every time I lose. I'm a big bank every time I lose money. You just replenish what I lost. Whereas the rest of us have real risk, and we have to pay a much higher cost of capital than we would if we could just, if there was a real market.
And if you won't sell your business to them, they put in the green economy, which is run by government. They will selectively force you to sell your business, or they will shut you down.
Well, there's thousands of ways it happens, but there's a double standard in terms of regulatory enforcement. So, for example, I used to have a broker-dealer that was a small company, and before I'd worked on Wall Street, and if you look at the enforcement costs and time that we spent as a small business, it was significantly greater. But there are double standards.